There were times when people believed that time itself could break. The fear of a new beginning was so great that they were willing to sacrifice everything, even themselves. We see how different peoples tried to maintain the fragile link between the old and new years, from bloody trials to rituals so disturbing that they still challenge our imagination today, until we reach a point where a single mistake could mean the end of the world. Wonderworld takes you on a dark journey through 4 cultures. Imagine there were nights when time itself broke. Not just the date, but the order of the entire world. It was precisely these nights that people feared for thousands of years, and they invented bloody rituals to keep the year going at all. For us, time is just a number on our mobile phones, a calendar that simply keeps running. For earlier cultures, time was something dangerous, something that had to be fed anew every year, with tears, with blood, with sacrifices. In this video, you will travel through such moments, to a king in Babylon, a lion goddess in Egypt, experience a night with the Celts, and immerse yourself in a very scary time. If you like, sit back, close your eyes, and we'll start in spring, in Babylon. Think of the turn of the year. Perhaps you see the same image that almost everyone has in their minds today. The 1st of January. Midnight. Fireworks exploding in the winter night sky. A countdown. 10, 9, 8. A kiss. A clink of glasses. A promise that this year will finally be different. But for most of human history, the turn of the year didn't look like this. There was no fixed date, no universal midnight, no glitter. Instead, the year began whenever the sky or the rivers or the fields showed people that the fragile order of the world was about to change. Some cultures followed the sun and measured the year by its long, burning path across the sky. Others trusted the moon, watching it grow and disappear into darkness, month after month. Still others tried to combine the two, chasing the sun and moon at the same time, always a little bit out of balance. And far away from calendars and clocks, farmers and tribes felt the year in the ground beneath their feet. For them, the new year began when the last harvest was brought in, or when the first deep darkness fell. Today, we think of New Year's Eve as a party. For our ancestors, it was a matter of survival. If they chose the wrong moment, performed the wrong ritual, failed to appease the wrong god, they believed the consequences could be crop failure, the return of monsters, the collapse of the order of the universe itself. A new year was not just a date. It was a dangerous threshold, a crack in time where the rules of the world became thin and something could slip through. Tonight, we cross those thresholds together. We follow a year of fear, from winter to spring to summer to autumn. This is not a story about fireworks. It is a story about what people do when they are certain that the world could end tonight. When you are ready, let us begin our journey in the depths of the winter, where a hungry creature waits for the first night of the year. The creature they called Nian. Imagine it's winter in an old village in China. The wind is thin and biting. The ground is frozen hard. There has been little to eat for weeks. The people have grown quieter, slower, thinner, and somewhere in that silence, something waits. They call it Nian. a hungry creature, half beast, half shadow, that comes only once a year. Not on a fixed date. Not on the 1st of January. It comes when a certain moon is at a certain point in the sky. In China, the calendar follows not only the sun and not only the moon. It is both. A luni-solar calendar. The months follow the moon, from new moon to new moon, 12 times a year. But the big festivals, the seasons, the order of the world, must also fit with the sun. So the new year shifts. Sometimes it's in January, sometimes in February. To us, this seems chaotic. To them, it was precise. It was the moment when winter had reached its lowest point and spring was beginning to breathe again, very, very quietly. It is precisely at this threshold between death and new beginnings that Nian is said to arrive. Legend has it that on New Year's Eve, it rises from the mountains or from the depths of the sea, with a mouth so large that entire people could disappear into it. It hunts animals, cattle, and sometimes children. As the last days of the old year approach, the village changes. During the day, there is still hustle and bustle. People run back and forth, carrying bundles of straw, bundles of bamboo, gathering their last supplies. But the closer the night comes, the heavier the air becomes. Doors are locked. Shutters are closed. This time, the fires in the hearth are not burning for cooking, but for protection. For Nian, they say, fears 3 things: noise, fire, and the color red. So they hang red signs on their doors, red ribbons on their windows, red cloths over their clothes. They stick red paper characters on beams and posts with wishes for luck and survival. And when it gets dark, the waiting begins. The families sit close together in a single room, the air heavy with smoke and the cold seeping through every crack. Outside, there is only wind. Or is there? Somewhere in the distance, there could be a scratching sound, a crack in the frozen wood. Perhaps it is just a branch. Perhaps Nian is just placing his paw on the first stepping stone of the village. In old versions of these stories, people were sacrificed. Sometimes it was said that certain houses had to give part of their family so that the village as a whole would be spared. The monster Nian is a legend, but the hunger, the fear, the violence of winter were very, very real. The Chinese New Year, the Spring Festival, did not just mark a new year. It was a ritual to tame these forces. People made noise, with drums, with gong beats, with raw popping sounds, which later became fireworks. They lit fires, leaving bright trails in the night, so that whatever came out of the darkness would hesitate and retreat. And they surrounded themselves with red, the color of blood and life, of power and luck, in the hope that the boundary between humans and what wanted to eat them would remain stable. Underneath all these symbols lies a simple truth. At the deepest point of winter, the world is vulnerable. When supplies are scarce, the cold is deep. People are tired and weak. It takes very little for everything to tip over. The story of Nian gives this feeling a face. It is easier to fear a monster from the mountains than the invisible hand of hunger, chance, the cold. And so they sit that night, in the flickering red of the lanterns, in the roar of the drums, in the crackling of the first fireworks, and tell themselves that somewhere out there, an ancient beast is retreating. In reality, they may be driving away something else, the paralyzing fear that they are at the mercy of nature. When morning comes and no house has been destroyed, no child has disappeared, when the smoke clears and a delicate hint of spring is in the air, then everyone breathes a sigh of relief. Not because a monster has been defeated, but because together they have made it through the most dangerous threshold of the year. And somewhere between the red banners, the gifts, the noise, a new year begins. Now imagine it's already spring in Babylon. The air is heavy with dust, but for the first time in months, it's warm. The fields outside the city show delicate green lines, like scars on the earth. And in the midst of this blossoming world, the city is preparing for something very dark. They call it Akitu, the New Year Festival. In Babylon, the calendar followed the movements of the moon. Months began when the first narrow crescent appeared in the evening sky. But the year itself had to match the sun, to spring, to the equinox. So the New Year Festival shifted until the moon and the season matched, and a new cycle could begin. Akitu lasted many days. Celebrations, rituals, prayers, processions. But at the center of it all stood one man, the king. On all other days of the year, he was the embodiment of order. He wore a crown and a scepter, had palaces built, armies marched, and his name carved in stone. But on this one day in the new year, he was broken. The king enters the temple without an entourage, without weapons. Just him and the high priest. The texts say that the king had to lay down his crown, his scepter, his rings, everything that made him a ruler. Then the priest bound his hands and struck him so hard that tears would flow. The ancient scribes say that it was a good sign if the king really wept. When his tears mixed with his blood, it was seen as proof that he was still humble. For in Babylonian thinking, the king stood between the gods and the people. If he became too proud, too confident, too harsh, then the order of the entire world could be shaken. At New Year, this risk was reassessed. The Babylonians believed that the gods themselves had to decide whether this king was still worthy of being their representative. So they took everything from him, made him cry, made him tremble, and watched to see if the gods would accept him again. After this humiliation, the king would have his insignia returned to him piece by piece: crown, scepter, ring. Each object a silent promise: you may rule for another year. But beneath the surface lies a threat. If the gods reject you one day, not only will your reign end, but so will the order of the world. Babylon's new year was not fireworks, not a quiet countdown to midnight. It was a test, a symbolic execution, a cosmic reset. The message was clear: the world is fragile, and sometimes even a king must bleed and weep so that it may continue. Now, travel to a land where rain almost never falls, and all life depends on a single river, the Nile. For the ancient Egyptians, the year was a circle of sun. Their calendar counted 365 days, almost like ours. But the true beginning of the year was not just a date. It was an event, the moment the Nile rose. For months, the land was dry, dusty, hard as burnt stone. Then, suddenly, somewhere in the south, the water rose, and a brown, muddy flood migrated northwards. To us, this sounds like nature. To them, it was a goddess who came to give, or to take. Too little water meant hunger. Too much water meant destruction. Between these extremes lay the life and death of an entire empire. In their myths, the Egyptians tell of a lion goddess who once wanted to see too much blood. They called her Sekhmet, a figure with the body of a woman and the head of a lioness, who was equated with the heat of the sun, with fever, with frenzy. In one story, she is sent out to punish humanity, but she does not stop. The rivers turn red, the earth drinks blood, the gods begin to fear. To save the world, they must deceive her. They mix beer with red dye until it looks like fresh blood and pour it over the fields. Sekhmet, blinded by bloodlust, pounces on it, drinks, 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 until she becomes drunk, falls down, and finally falls asleep. This motif, divine wrath that almost wipes out humanity, was later associated with festivals in which people drank until they staggered, in the hope of appeasing the dangerous side of the gods. So when the Nile rose and the new year began, the same thought lay beneath the songs and sacrifices. Please, not too much and not too little this time. The Egyptians measured time by the water. A year had passed when the river returned and flooded everything, covering the land with fertile mud, and their fate began anew. We are heading west, to a cooler land where the sky hangs low and the wind blows through bare trees. To the world of the Celts. Their year was not a circle of numbers, but a circle of work and harvest. They knew the moment when the last harvest had been brought in. The fields empty, the granaries full, or not. This moment was their turn of the year. They called it Samhain. On the night of Samhain, the boundary between the world of the living and the world of the dead was as thin as tissue paper. It was believed that the dead could return, to visit their homes, to look at their livestock, to check on their descendants. In some stories, they could be appeased with food, with fire, with seats kept free for them. In others, they were more dangerous. They could bring curses, misfortune, illness, the loss of livestock. So the Celts lit large fires. They drove their livestock through the flames to purify them, and carried sparks home to rekindle their own hearth fires. The old year had to die so that a new one could be born. And in the midst of this dying, the dead wandered. Sometimes the living dressed up to mingle with the spirits, unrecognized, untouchable. It was only much later that these customs became our modern Halloween. But deep down, the same idea still remains. There are nights in the year when the order of things becomes too thin, when something can reach over from the other side. For the Celts, Samhain was not only a festival of the dead, but also the moment when the year began in darkness. Their new year did not begin with light and noise, but with long nights, cold winds, and the honest realization that sometimes darkness comes first, and the light must fight its way back. Imagine waking up one night when time has stood still. Outside, no cars, no voices, no wind. Just this one heavy silence that feels like the world is holding its breath. It is precisely such nights that people have feared for millennia. Not because they knew what time it was, but because they sensed that something was wrong with time itself. For us, time is a number on our mobile phones, a calendar that keeps running whether we want it to or not. For earlier cultures, time was not a neutral flow. But there is a place where the fear of the end of time was so great that people believed that with every new beginning, the world could really come to an end. Far away from Babylon, from the Nile, and from the misty hills of the Celts, there lived people who pierced their sky with step pyramids. In the land we now call Mexico, the Aztecs did not just count days and years. They counted world ages. In their myths, our world was not the first. There had been other ones, other worlds, all of which had perished. One ended in water, one in wind, one in darkness. And each time the world began anew, until their own time, the fifth sun. But even this fifth sun was not safe. They believed that it had to be constantly fed with blood to remain in the sky. The most frightening moment was one that came only once every 52 years. When two of their calendars ended at the same time, they believed that the world could tip over again. This moment was called the New Fire. Imagine the night before. All fires in the city were extinguished. No hearth flames, no torches, no lights. The houses lay black and cold under the sky. It was believed that on this night, demons would crawl out of the corners of the world if the sun did not return. People crouched in the darkness, holding their breath, while outside, only a group of priests was on the move. They carried a single prisoner with them. His chest was bare. His heart was still there, but it would not remain there long. On a hill outside the city, they waited for a sign, the appearance of a certain star in the night sky. When the star was in the right place, it was the moment of decision. The priest threw the prisoner onto a stone, opened his chest, and lit the first new fire in his empty body cavity. From the flames that flared up inside a dying body, torches were lit and carried back to the dark city. From there, all other fires were relit. Hearth fires, temple lights, street torches. With each new flame, the world breathed a little easier. It was believed that if this sacrifice was accepted, the sun would rise once more, and time would continue for another 52 years. On that night, the fear of the end of time was not an abstract feeling. It was the sight of the sky in complete darkness, while somewhere a heart stopped beating, so the sun would not stop moving. And when you look at your mobile phone on a quiet night today and see the seconds just counting down, then remember that there were times when people believed that the world could really break apart in a single night, on nights when time itself could break down. Perhaps the feeling of fear when time stands still is something we have never completely lost. Only today, we no longer know what we are waiting for. In this journey with Wonderworld through dark rituals and bloody traditions, we discover how 4 cultures tried to survive the transition from one year to the next, until we reach a moment when the fear of the end of time was literally paid for with life. Look forward to your journey with Wonderworld through the next dark mystery. Until then, pull your blanket a little higher and feel safe.